We're off to a really good start, and I just want to introduce my dear colleague, Dinda Elliott, without whom this project and this day could have never come to fruition, from its conceptualization to its inception to today. So she's going to give us a more detailed introduction to what's in store, but first, a big thank you for bringing it to life.
To China Institute's first Food and Ideas Festival. Thank you first, Council Lee. Thank you so much for your remarks, and thank you for this beautiful bag, which I will treasure. And thank you, Danielle, all right, there you are, for your partnership around your magnificent rice paddy. And I will have to tell you that the minute we heard from Danielle that she was doing this rice paddy, we just said, oh my God, we have to be part of this. And we are so grateful to be part of it and able to support it. I urge you all to go see it. It's a 3-minute walk from here. There's a map in your brochure, in your program for today. There's a map to it. So please take a stroll over and take a look, because it is truly a beautiful exhibit. And go to that, and also go to her fabulous feast next weekend. So thanks, Danielle. We have many thanks today, so please bear with me for a second. First, thanks to our co-chair, Yusai Khan and Min, who's here today. I don't see her yet, but I think she's here. Who worked so hard to spread the word about this event. And welcome to all the new members who have joined our family thanks to their efforts. Thanks also to Trustee Sophia Shang, who worked so hard on this event and brought us Langjiu. And thank you, Langjiu, for the delicious cocktails we'll be serving later. You'll all definitely want to stick around for that later. After 5 o'clock, we're going to be serving cocktails, amazing cocktails that are designed by Langjiu and Sophia. And I also want to say that you'll want to stick around later, because at 6 o'clock, we're going to have a special performance by Chinese rap star Johan Phoenix. So please stay for that. Our friends at Junza Kitchen helped us, as always, with their intellectual firepower. Thank you, Lucas, and your team. And Nikki Chang connected us to some of the amazing designers who are going to be with us today. And thank you, Annie Tong, I'm not sure if she's here yet, but for connecting us to more wonderful restaurants. The amazing art impresario Missine Long, who's here. I want to thank her for bringing the brilliant artist Li Jian, who is going to be speaking today. Thank you, Missine. Thanks also to our friends Yi Xue and Sui Qiao, I don't know if she's here yet, but at the Beijing Center for Contemporary Art Foundation, for connecting us to the young artists, Sam and Jiayuan, who are painting our murals today. So please take a look at what they're working on. We've commissioned them. They're young, emerging artists in New York. They're painting the windows today, and I hope you'll go say hi and watch what they're doing. Thank you to the passionate and dedicated China Institute team especially. Aaron, this could not have happened without your vision and your hard work. Michael, woohoo! Michael, who has produced the night market, thank you so much. And Michael and Aaron basically hung all these lanterns, everybody, so it's really their incredible work and vision. And I want to thank you and congratulations, Jeremy, Yao, and Sveta. These people, without your work, these people here today wouldn't be here. So they worked so hard on the marketing and design efforts, so thank you for that. Thank you so much to Rachel for helping to run the show today. And thank you to Michael as well for helping to run it. And thanks to all of our volunteers. Look for them in the Red China Institute t-shirts. So we want to give a special thanks to Hanban. Because Hanban, without their generous support, we literally couldn't have produced this event. And we also want to thank the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, whose support is going to allow us to build this space that we're sitting in over the next year. And more than a year from now, we'll be ready to open a center here that will present modern China, from installation art to video art to new technologies and environmental issues. And this will truly be the only place in New York City dedicated to presenting modern China to the world. So we're very excited and proud of that. And that leads me to today. There is a big idea behind this festival. It's about food and fun, of course, but we also want to present the other China, different from the one that we hear about in the headlines that highlight political repression, economic expansionism, and trade war. The people you're going to hear from today represent a very modern China, You're going to hear from the young chefs and foodies, sustainability experts, architects, artists, and influencers who are creating China's new food and lifestyle culture. And despite the shadows that may be cast by the country's political climate, these are the leaders of China's next generation who are redefining their society from the ground up. So on to the program. The first panel.
Actually, just want to put in one more word just before we go into the panel. And Dinda talked about the Center for Contemporary China that we're going to be building out here. I just wanted to say a thank you to everybody for enduring the space. It's a preview for what's coming. Those of you who've seen our second floor built out, and really amusing, we're building out more. We're expanding our Confucius Institute Center there to have music at China Institute. We're expanding to have a pre-K school, which is going to be a bilingual pre-K school for little kids coming in with feeder program into the UN International School and to Trinity School. And I just want to say what you have down here. I noticed I saw Ingrid somewhere, the secretary of our board is here, Ingrid Ehrenberg, thank you. This space is going to be transformed to become the Center for Contemporary China, and we're just sort of borrowing it in its raw state now. So thanks for living through it with us. And I'm sorry to interrupt, now let's get on to the programs.
Thank you so much, James. Okay, so the first panel, of course, is about food. So panelists, please come up. Our moderator today is Adam Platt, author and food critic from New York Magazine. And he will be talking with Carolyn Phillips, a cookbook author and Chinese food historian, Kate Wang, a food blogger who keeps a widely sought-after list of the best Chinese restaurants in cities around America, so you might want to chase her down later and ask her for her list. And a young superstar chef, Lucas Sin, who is a master chef behind Jun's Kitchen and a cutting-edge, passionate cook on his own right. So please, over to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Dinda. Hello, panelists. My name is Adam Platt. I'm a restaurant critic for New York Magazine. I love Chinese food. I spent a lot of time in China when I was younger, not so much recently. So I'm as eager as all of you are to hear about the great multi-revolutions that are taking place in the food world in China. But why don't you guys first introduce yourselves before we...
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Lucas. I'm the chef and the culinary director at Jun's Kitchen. I'm from Hong Kong, and for a long time, had dedicated myself to learning Japanese cuisine. But having met the right partners and the right vision, I've now decided to dedicate the rest of my life probably to studying Chinese food and to transforming what people think about Chinese food to give it the attention that I think it's going to do throughout history.
My name is Kate, and thanks Dinda for the lovely introduction. So I'm a native of Chengdu, Sichuan province, and by day I'm a business consultant, but in my spare time and my real passion is to explore Chinese food and culture and how they're related. So I blog and I write, and because I'm lucky to travel a lot for my work, I always make sure that wherever I go I'm looking at the latest trends and developments of Chinese food all over the world, in the US, China, of course, and then in Europe as well.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Phillips. I went to Taiwan in 1976 to learn Chinese and stayed there for 8 years, got myself a husband, and worked with the National Museum of History and National Central Library for 5 years as an interpreter and translator, and then did the same thing in the California federal courts for a long time. And after that, I burned out and decided to really concentrate on my love as well, which is Chinese cooking. And I wrote All Under Heaven and the Dim Sum Field Guide, which were both published 2 years ago. And I'm writing a memoir for Norton right now. That's me.
Okay, so I'm going to pretend I'm a Chinese astronaut. And I blasted off 20 years ago. And I have now just returned to my native country. And I'm a food addict. I like food from all over the place. How would each of you describe, what would you describe as the single biggest change in the food scene? Is it diversity? Is it dynamism? Is it tradition? I mean, give me an idea, just like a simple idea like that.
The biggest change in Chinese food in China, I think, in the last 20 years, is the stuff that's not that fun to talk about, but is really important. I think Chinese food businesses in China now are really incredibly well run. I go to China once a year, try to spend about a month there, to study how people are making food and how restaurants run in China. Back when I was growing up, I would go to China and it was like the wild, wild west. Like, you had no idea what was going to happen. You had no idea if you were going to get sick. You had no idea where to go for food. It was just so crazy. But now, the standardized, scalable restaurant models in China are, in my opinion, the best in the world. Right? Some of my favorite restaurants in China have 100, 200 locations, but the quality is incredible. They're sourcing sustainably, and they're sourcing thoughtfully, and they're telling stories through the food. It really is an incredible thing.
Well, I definitely agree with Lucas. Another thing I would say is, like in the United States, I think Chinese food has been very much influenced by social media and trendiness. So, in China, Douyin or TikTok in the US is really big. There are a lot of foodies who now, post little videos on there. They're chasing after trends. You have something that opens, in Chengdu, I was there recently, and there's a chain called Shicha. It's a tea place, right? And it was so popular, hour-long lines. People pay other people to stand in line. So the millennials are really into the latest trends. I wouldn't say that they don't care about tradition or history, but they're really very much chasing what's new, what's next. And I think these flavors of the day change really quickly, especially in my hometown of Chengdu, which is a known foodie paradise. So I would say that's a really big thing.
What they both said, I totally concur. I noticed too is the change in quality was probably the most remarkable thing. And service in the quality of the food, in the diversity, things that were offered, and also in the pride that was taken in the culinary arts of China. And the ability of the cooks now, the chefs, to then interpret them in their own way and to bring them to another level.
So everything's changed for the better.
So far, I think so.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
So what would be your favorite chain? You're talking about these chains. And I gather you think the chains in China are much better than chains in the United States.
They're thought of as a little bit differently. So there's this restaurant called Yao, and they make Yunnanese cuisine. So if you're familiar with Yunnanese cuisine, you know that's going to take over the world. It's like the best food of all time. It's an incredible province that has it's got great ingredients. It's got amazing culture because it once upon a time was part of where the Silk Road kind of crossed over. It borders basically Southeast Asia, so it absorbs a lot of these sort of herbal, grassy flavors, as well as like spices coming from the north, and then it's got a lot of fresh dairy and all these things that you might not even think of as part of regular Chinese food. So what Yao did was they have about 100 to 200 locations now, and they were open maybe like less than 10 years ago. Or I think they started in Yunnan and then now
The ownership is from Yunnan.
Yeah, and so this is how a restaurant that has so many locations, to me, is one of, let me start again. If Yunhai opened a restaurant in New York today, they would absolutely get a Michelin star within a year. The reason is because they have China scale behind them. So when they say that they're putting a specific type of smoked cheese on the table, not only do they own the production of that cheese, they also own the production and the whole supply chain. So they know that they know the names of the cows that are producing the milk through which they make the cheese, right? Same thing for their mushrooms. They have people that they employ to go forage for these mushrooms. Same thing for the pork. Because they own the supply chain for cutting the pork, they can always use the meat between the third and the fourth vertebrae. This is what they're telling me, just for this one dish. And that type of like specificity, we don't think of as made in China, Chinese cuisine often. But number one, by appealing to a specific region in terms of the cuisine, and number two, appealing to a deep understanding of how to control the whole supply chain for building restaurants has made some of these restaurants like truly, genuinely incredible. And at the end of the day, you're paying something like 100 to 150 RMB per person to sit through, 13 courses of incredibly specific regional Yunnan cuisine. We have to all go sometime. It's really incredible. And it's not just that, it's like Sichuan cuisine. It's like, we all think of Cantonese food as this one thing, but then we appeal to the eastern side of Canton, and suddenly you have another chain that's popping up starting in that space. and then slowly scaling to 100 units or so. Oh yeah, sure, sorry.
Chengdu, they like to go eat in what we would think of as chain restaurants in big malls, which has a negative connotation in the US, right? You know, going to get Orange Julius or a food court place, you think, no. When I want a nice meal, I don't go there. But in China, every mall, and if you've been to China, you know, every block has a mall, has a food court, and many of the offerings are fantastic. Yunhaiyao is like every other, you know, block. There's a mall with Yunhaiyao. There's also Xibei Youmian, which is food from like western China. Again, there are Sichuanese chains, and it is not at all viewed negatively. They're high quality, and I think one of the reasons why my father, my colleagues prefer to go there is because they know it is consistent. There's an ingredient quality, and there are these weird guarantees. I think Lucas mentioned, like in Xibei, if your food doesn't arrive in 10 minutes,
it depends, but it's
or
between 5 and
10 minutes, you get your money back. And you know, there's a lot of bad service in China still, and so this is very attractive to people who are very busy, young professionals. So I think that's something very remarkable to China.
To what extent, and Carol, you can answer this, obviously this is driven by a whole new generation of food lovers and food lunatics, right? So is it fair to say that China is a nation of food lunatics, going back centuries? But to what extent is it driven by this new generation? And to what extent are the old mom and pop ways of cooking and of presenting restaurants, to what extent are they in peril?
Okay, I'll try to answer that. To me, they're more like real dedicated foodies rather than lunatics. I think Chinese are probably the most food-loving people I've ever met. My husband is probably chairman of the board. For example, I can give you a good example of the generational changes from the last visit that we took to Chengdu on behalf of the State Department a couple years ago. And we met with the Retired Chef Association there, and we were talking to them about my book and what I thought of as China being not a monolithic cuisine, but actually a minimum of at least 35 regional cuisines. At first they were a little skeptical, but then we started talking about it more and more, and they said, yeah, there's not just 35, there's more than that. And I was exactly, that's it, you know, you guys have like the gold mine of the world when it comes to food. And so they said, come to lunch with us. And so we went to their clubhouse and had like course after course of these meals. And these were the people that could cook from all the dong and things like that. They were really high level, excellent chefs, but it wasn't fancy food. It was all excellent food, and it was all modulated. It was not all mala, the spicy and numbing that people tend to associate with Sichuanese cooking. But everything was modulated and was like a beautiful wave that brought us forward to the conclusion of the meal. And then we went to Yujilan, the great gourmet chef in Chengdu, and the chef there, Chef Lan, was kind enough to allow me to cook in his kitchen with him. And at first it was a real grasshopper moment for him, because I went in there, I had my pearls on, I thought we were going for dinner. And he says, you want to cook in the kitchen? I was like, hey, you know, that's like, of course. He said, okay, here's these 3 carp inside this wok here, and I want you to just stir fry them. And I said, anything else? I said, just no oil, just stir fry them. And he's kind of looking at me askance, and I rolled up my sleeves, and he looked at all the scars on my arm from cooking all these years. And he was like, okay, I guess I can trust you with 3 fish. So I tossed these fish over a low flame for an hour, and I didn't give up. And I think he was testing me. But when he came, at the very end, he came up with this broth that was the essence of the fish. It had the scales, it had the innards, it had all part of the fish in there. But it was sweet and it was milky by the time he added water to it. And that was bringing food to a whole nother level. And then we went into a fermented bean factory, a doubanjiang factory on the outskirts of town. Watched them making soy sauce and the famous bean paste of Sichuan. And the owners took us out to a dinner in a farmhouse afterwards. And it was farmhouse cuisine. And it was like freshly killed fish like sturgeon and so forth. And it was this whole other view of the food of this one city. And it was brilliant because you could just see that it's not simply low level, high level. It's this entire spectrum. And it's not just in Chengdu, it's like all over the country. And so that's why I keep telling people, when you think of China, you tend to think of it as a country. But you have to remember, it's the size of Europe. And it's just as diverse as Europe. From Scandinavia down to Gibraltar and over to Greece. That much variety in the terrain, in the ingredients, and in the cultures. So as you talk about Chinese foods, try to remember, it's like saying European food. And it's just that dramatic and that dynamic.
Okay, so basically what you're saying was that this great hunger for good cooking, the tradition of good cooking has always been there.
Oh yes.
Which is, we all know
yes.
that, it's always been there. And the reawakening is caused by economics, a new generation, a regionalism. I mean, how would you describe like the generation that you're talking about? I mean, where's it coming from?
Economics is a huge part of it, absolutely. And for the consumer to feel empowered such that they are able to eat the food that they want to eat, and they can eat food that represents them is a big deal. Some of my best friends in Beijing are all from different parts of Sichuan, and during the day, they are, one of them's a hand model, one of them like runs a club, one of them's like a low-key hip-hop artist, one of them plays amateur volleyball for a living, but all of them within the last sort of 5, 10, 15 years have been allowed by economics to open tiny little restaurants that cook food and cook specific dishes from their little region of Sichuan. Because if everybody understands that Sichuan food is interesting, that's a good thing. The next step is for them to break down even Sichuan into further little pockets. So you have a place that's just making jiajiao, which is kind of like a medicinal beef stew on cilantro. And that's all they serve. And this hand model dude actually can run this restaurant, and people will come because they're interested and they feel empowered because they want to know that Sichuan food is even bigger than they thought. That's a really powerful feeling for both these small business owners and the consumer that I've noticed, certainly in the last couple of years.
Similar to what Lucas said, Kaifang and just people moving all over China. It used to be back in my parents' generation, it was such a big deal for a northerner, right, Beifangren, to marry a Nanfangren southerner. It's like, ooh, almost like mixed race marriage, right? Because culturally, that generation, your food habits are very different. You weren't moving around as much. And now, when I look at my colleagues in Beijing, many of them are from the north, but many of them are from all over Xinjiang, Sichuan, Guangdong, like many different places. And where they choose to eat, especially in Beijing, I think because it's more of a melting pot culinarily, there are so many different options there. And but then I think about Chengdu, right? So I go there about maybe 2 times a year for the last 6, 7 years. And for the longest time, it's actually very hard to find regional cuisine other than Sichuanese cuisine in Chengdu. I think because to me, the Chengdunese are the original foodies, right? There's so much richness in Sichuan cuisine. You go 1 hour outside of Chengdu, there's some different dish, right? And so I think they were plumbing that for the longest time. But I've noticed in the last year or 2, as Chengdu also has been growing in a phenomenal way, there are more regional cuisines there as well. There are people who would never have thought to move to Chengdu, right? Before it was Beishangguang. You just go to one of those 3 cities after college. Now the second-tier cities are growing, like Hangzhou, Chengdu, Xi'an, and now you have people from not necessarily wanting to go to Beishangguang. Now they're going to these second-tier cities, and I think there you're going to start seeing a food revolution as well in terms of more regional offerings, and that's super exciting.
It's insane, actually. I mean, I spent time in China during the, in the bad old days during the Cultural Revolution. There was nothing to eat. I mean, literally. And the sense one got was that the old traditions were gone, much like in other parts of the culture, that there had been the people who knew them, the masters, had moved away or died or been persecuted, and there was nothing. So it's really quite amazing. Now, did they obsess over superstar chefs in China the way we do here, or the way people do in Tokyo or Paris? Is that a thing in China?
I spend, every time I go to China, I try to cook in a restaurant, and almost every time, whatever restaurant I'm in, some cook will tell me, hey kid, get out of here, get out quick. What do you mean? He said, back in the day, there are 3 things you don't want to be. You don't want to be an actor, you don't want to be a prostitute, and you want to be a cook. These days, there's only one of these careers left that you don't want to do. And I said, oh my goodness. And I mean, the fact of the matter is that it still kind of sucks to be a cook in China, because it's often relegated to those that didn't complete their education or don't have the economic means to do something else. And that stereotype about the profession does hinder the creativity a little bit. Obviously, there are superstar chefs that are making incredible food, mostly through representing their own region. They'll come up and they'll say, I am the guardian of this particular sector of Chinese food. I am the new guard of Cantonese cuisine, for example, appealing to Shun De Cai. And then in that sense, those people are gaining traction and they're gaining a voice. But I think within China, there's a long way to go before young cooks can feel like this is something I want to do and this is something that's good for culture.
Well, another thing is the glorification of the cook really begins and ends with television. And we didn't, my mother wouldn't have allowed me to go to culinary school, for sure. But now she probably would have said, that's a great idea, you can be on TV just like Gordon Ramsay. And so, again, I think if China begins to have cooking shows and they have an Iron Chef Chinese or something like that, things are going to change.
Social media is a huge part of that, right? Have you guys seen people juggling cleavers on TikTok and like all these like ridiculous things, like Lisa Chi, like there's like kind of goddess of the wood in Sichuan, just like floating through the hills and making this like traditional food. I think social media has empowered quite a few people to cook interestingly too, but it's totally different, and I wouldn't imagine that Chinese cooks would abide by sort of an American television model to become a chef of the voice.
When I think of celebrity chefs in China, I feel like they're more celebritized, so to speak, here in the U.S. I think of Yu Bo, who has, had food and wine features, and he's based in Chengdu in Los Angeles. There's, of course, the chef of Yujilan, Lan Guiren, but I don't think they're actually as well known among, let's say, my friends. If you ask them, my Chinese friends, they have no idea who they are. But you might even have a chance in the U.S. if people read these magazines, American magazines regularly, they might have heard of them. So I think that's kind of very interesting. Two, I also think that, along with what Lucas said, it's just how you train to be a chef these days. So I went to the Sichuan Luyo Xueyuan because my business consulting is in higher education in China, and so they're one of our clients, and I was talking to Li Yuanzhang, who I think you've met. He's the dean of that cooking school, and he's explaining to me, the students who we had accepted to cooking school, they're still the ones who basically, I wouldn't say failed the Gaokao, the college entrance exam, but it's really low. Like they had no other option but to say, okay, I'll come to this cooking school. And so, because I was specifically asking, do you see, more young people kind of wanting to be like, not celebrity chefs, but kind of like strike out on their own and really enthusiastic? Like, they come in kind of like not that enthusiastic, that they had no other choice. But he said by the time they graduate, they have a different outlook because they have like a 98% employment rate because chefs are needed everywhere. Cruise ships is a big employment. But these kids aren't seeking to open up their own restaurants and make some sort of hipster, Chinese food. So I think there's still some ways to go because, the education system for chefs is still very traditional, very sort of, it's not quite there yet in that way.
To what extent, well, this is sort of a two-part question, are trends in China meta trends influenced by meta cooking trends or food trends in the West? And my second question, the sub-question, obviously in the last 20 years, food has blown up everywhere, but certainly in this country. And it's not just really about food anymore. It's about cultural, it's about culture, it's about identity, it's about the environment, it's about politics. So is this an aspect also in China? Are things like locavorism and regionalism driving, and the purity of ingredients driving this? Is a big force behind this?
One thing that comes to mind is I cooked for a chef in Chengdu that runs Fuji Feipian. And he, really interesting, he's built a glass house on top of this big building where his restaurant is. And he does this thing called Chef's Table. And why does he call it Chef's Table? Because he has access to Netflix and he's watched it. And he wants to do Chef's Table in Chengdu, the first guy to do it. And then he has Instagram. So he can see all these dishes that Chef Table chefs are putting up on Instagram. So, however, he's never been to the US. He's never been to Europe. He almost doesn't even have the means, or he's like, I can't get the visa to come visit you in New York and all those things. So, based off of visual cues alone, he's trying to make Chengdu-style Sichuan food into something that could be eventually on Chef's Table. And you ask him, why are you doing this? Like, why is this interesting to you? He says, well, I want to be the first Michelin-starred restaurant in Chengdu. He says, my greatest pride so far is that my restaurant has been named a UNESCO heritage site, or a non-tangible, intangible. Yeah. So what's interesting to me is that this guy who has no real reason, sort of, to appeal to the West, thinks that the only way his cooking can be accredited seriously is by Western organizations. It doesn't matter if he's named the Grandmaster by the Chengdu government. To him, it's more important that he can get a Michelin star eventually, and he can eventually become one of the best restaurants in the world, as accredited by San Pellegrino, for example. And that's sort of curious to me, and if you think about it, there really is no other way, because it's not like any of the Chinese awards really mean that much globally. It doesn't speak to the amount of influence a chef can have on a culture at large, unless it's a Western organization. And obviously there are biases that happen because of that. So certainly I would think, hopefully it will improve in the future. Foodies will start voting on top of with their dollar, with the Yelp score and things, and that might change things a bit, but sort of curious.
I think that you can see a interesting trajectory by looking at Taiwan, because Taiwan started off in the late 70s. It was pretty, almost third world when I went there. It's very, as far as the cooking was, it was very, very simple. But then we had the tech revolution, and that was money came in, and great restaurants opened up in Taipei almost overnight. With all these private chefs who had worked for the military or for the wealthy or the famous were opening up their own restaurants. And so this was like when I learned to eat in Taiwan. It was like being in the best place in the best time. And then as you can see then as that peak went down as the chefs began to retire or die. And their new chefs came up and they were trying to do new spins on the old classics. And it was also the 80s, and you remember the 80s, that was like everything was layered and everybody had squiggles, and it was really crazy, and that's exactly what they had in Taiwan. And the red wine and foie gras and caviar, and it was fancy schmancy. And then it went through a different change through, I think it was almost like a ground up movement by the young people for organic things, for back to the land, a feeling of pride. The rivers there that had been very polluted were suddenly cleaned up. You have parks there, and you can actually eat the fish. It's like the Thames in London. And now I've seen friends who I've worked with, like even Taiwanese, a friend of ours, a guy who worked at the magazine with me. He went back to Ningbo and coastal Zhejiang and learned to master yangal, which is the sticky rice cakes. And it's like this, you can see these individual pieces of passion just growing up where people decide to master a skill, having real pride in their culture and in their background. And it's not just provincial, where I'm Taiwanese, I'll only learn Taiwanese things, but I'm Chinese and I'm going to learn something about Chinese culture that really thrills me, and I'm going to dedicate my life to it. And I can kind of see that happening in China as well, as people are beginning to demand organic products and wanting their children to eat well and to breathe good air.
What Carolyn said. I think one thing that's really important to keep in mind when looking at China is to not really extrapolate that just because Chinese people have certain preferences, that they came about as a result of a similar ideological similarity to the West, by which I mean, for example, I think, in the US, we're really into, let's say, veganism or vegetarianism or health foods for very philosophical reasons as much as practical. But when I look at my friends and colleagues in China, they're very pragmatic. the reason why they want better quality, organic, etc., it's not because they have some sort of, they're looking at the West and saying, ooh, that's really great, or, oh, I really believe in sustainable farming. Maybe not yet, maybe eventually, but it's because they have children now. They want safe food. This is why some of you may have heard of the new-ish store that came out, grocery store that came out in the last couple years by the same folks as Tencent, Alipay. It is a high-end supermarket, instantly overnight popular because they provide imported seafood and meat and high-quality vegetables. It is a seal of quality, and my Chinese colleagues are happy to spend a lot of money to go and seek that out. But it's not necessarily because they believe in organic ideas or sustainable farming. It's because they want to know that their food is not full of pesticides, that it's actually pork that they're buying, and things like that. So I think we should always keep that in mind when we look at Chinese behaviors, not to project our sort of more Western ideology onto that. But I think things have definitely changed very fast. Health food actually is something that's super fun to see my colleagues. When I first came to China in 2013, my colleagues made fun of me for eating salads in winter, and then also for exercising. I had a personal trainer. You know what? Now I go back to China to see my colleagues. Guess what they're eating for lunch? They're ordering out salads from one of the many takeout apps. And a bunch of them have hired a personal trainer in the basement of our office building. And so I think Chinese will their ability to really adapt and grow and to, try new things, phenomenal. I think I have not seen that anywhere else.
Bars in China?
Oh yeah. In the major cities, for sure, in Beijing, everywhere. Salad bars, salad on command.
And the salad's not filled with pesticides? It's all...
Well, we don't know. Organic, who knows? But...
So, what's the greatest food city in China? You can all choose one and argue as you wish.
I'm from Chengdu, so I have to say Chengdu. However, I agree with Lucas. My all-time favorite regional cuisine, I have to say, is Yunnan. It is really incredible, and I think it is poised, I agree, to take over in the U.S.
Every country that eats Thai food or Vietnamese food is going to take up Yunnanese cuisine with even more fervor. I'm really interested in, people think this one thing about the region, but there's actually this other thing. I love that appeal. Zigong is an amazing place right outside Chengdu that serves a particular style of Sichuan cuisine that isn't essentially just mala. A lot of the dishes are green or white. Shunde has recently been featured a lot in the media. Around that area also Qingzhao, Cantonese cooking that's a lot of based on beef and water, and really sort of practical, almost like what people used to think of as peasant food, I think is having their moment. The difficulty for so-called peasant food is that, well, most of the cuisine that everybody knows about Chinese food comes from it being well cataloged and represented in sort of imperial contexts. So Cantonese food, a lot of Eastern cuisine, what became Shanghainese sort of Su, Jiangsu cuisine, is all because of these big courts. But now that we don't have these courts anymore, and information travels differently, you can start looking to places where people used to think, oh, they don't have cooks there, they don't have emperors to cook for, so why in the world would they have a good sense of cuisine? They might not, maybe not all the recipes have been written down, but the flavors are there because the sourcing is good and the passion is there. So places like Qingzhou and Yunnan, I think, are on the rise for that reason.
For me, I'm a time traveler, so I would say probably Taipei in 1984, because you had all the provinces of China represented in their full glory in one place, and my husband and I used to eat absolutely the entire country's foods. Everything from the grand palaces down to the street markets, and then of course Taiwan's night markets. Taiwan was the greatest place to be, and if I have can get a wish granted for when I can come back and stay forever, that would probably be that. So I could just eat.
When I was, I think it was in Hong Kong 3 years ago, in Taiwan, among the sort of in-the-know regional food people was probably still was considered sort of the craft beer, craft whiskey, sort of breadbasket of Asia. I don't know how that happened, but it happened.
Well, they had the greatest chefs in China went there.
Well, I know that, but this is post that.
Oh.
This was the ingredients are pure, your technique is pure, you can do your own thing, there's no interference. That was what the Hong Kong chefs were pining for Taiwan, not anywhere north. I mean, there may have been some politics involved. So we'll finish, I mean, with the New York audience. So let's talk a little bit about Chinese food in New York. How's it going?
Oh man, you guys you have the best food here in Flushing, I swear. I mean, I went out there with Vice Munchies one time, and they said, let's just take a lift out there and just see what we can eat. And I fell out of the car practically because when they opened the door and there was like Fuzhou Yuan, Fuzhou style fish balls, and I hadn't had those since Taiwan. And they were like $2.50 for a bowl, and they were just like, I almost wept, they were so good. And it was just like the same thing, just going up and down the streets there. And it was just phenomenal what you guys have here. It's kind of like San Gabriel Valley in Los Angeles.
I'm going to tee up actually, Lucas, a little bit. So I don't live in New York, I live in Seattle, but I so look forward to every time I come to New York because, you know, in addition to the breadth, I've also noticed that it is one of the, obviously, I think New York and Los Angeles are the two cities in the U.S. that are the first to kind of get these, the Chinese hyper-regional trends. You know, for example, in the last couple of years, you have Yunnan noodle shops popping up here, Sichuanese xiaolongxia or what they call it, crawfish, right? And so I think that's really unique, and it starts here and then it goes elsewhere, like Seattle. You know, we finally have, I don't know, like hot coming. We have Haidilao coming in December. But I also, the other thing I think that's really unique about New York that I don't see as much elsewhere, including in LA, which has a lot of traditional Chinese restaurants, is innovation. In Chinese cuisine. Innovation by people, and Lucas will speak more to this, but you know, Chinese come here to study and stay in open restaurants. Things like what Lucas is doing, which he'll explain better, which is, I hesitate to use the word fusion, but it's just a very different take, right, on what you think of as Chinese food. And I think that kind of intellectual, on an intellectual level and also practical level makes New York really one of the most exciting places to see where the vanguard of Chinese cuisine in the U.S. is heading.
The creative Chinese cuisine in New York is really unique because of two things. One is that traditionally, if you went to the culinary school, you would have gone to that culinary school and you would have done an externship or an internship at a French restaurant or a New American or Italian restaurant. You'd have been there for a long, long time, and then right around the age of like between, let's say, 26 and 30, you think to yourself, am I really doing this forever? Am I going to make French food forever? And a lot of these cooks are looking at themselves and saying, no, I'm not doing that anymore. I should cook food that speaks to my soul and my blood. I want to appeal to regional cooking and I want to get creative. And so a lot of these cooks, a lot of them Chinese, are coming out of these French kitchens excellently trained, know exactly how to run a restaurant, and then they're going off and saying, I'm going to put my twist, or I'd like to tell my childhood story through my food. So that's one. And the other is exactly the new immigration and the new generation of immigrants that are coming here, which curiously are opening restaurants again, kind of like back in the day. And the reason is because they're stylish and they know exactly how to translate something that means, some type of cuisine that means a lot to them, to the New York public. My favorite restaurants that do things like that are like Mala Project, Hunan Slurp, The End Kitchen, all of these places, including our restaurant ourselves. All of us are first generation, just got here, finished higher education and thought to ourselves, why don't we just start making food? It'd be kind of cool, and tell people stories and that sort of thing. So it really is the most exciting time to be cooking Chinese food in New York. Well, regionality breeds diversity and diversity breeds excellence. So that's where New York is at.
I agree. You know, there's been an influx of, in the 60s and 50s, there was an influx of owners and chefs from China. And then it became sort of a washing machine of sort of sameness. And really in the last 5-10 years, there has been an arrival of a whole new generation of chefs and the food is like brightened considerably. Anyway, I don't think we have time for questions, but thank you guys. It was very informative. Thanks so much.
Okay, so that was amazing. Thank you all so much. I want to urge you all to buy Carolyn Phillips' cookbook, which is really considered to be a Bible for Chinese cooks, called All Under Heaven, correct? I also want to urge you all to go to Jun's Kitchen and taste the new take on the chunbing that they are making in Jun's Kitchen. It's delicious stuff. And finally, of course, I want you all to find Kate because she's got the lists of the best Chinese restaurants all around the country. But finally, I want to urge you guys to buy Adam Platt's new book, which is called...
You have to pre-order it now. It's published in November, and it's called The Book of Eating, Tales of, whatever, Gluttony from the Gluttony, whatever. Anyway, Book of Eating out of Platt, mid-November. Pre-order now on Amazon.
So you're all awesome. Thank you so much. And there's going to be a 10-minute break, everybody. I apologize, this space doesn't have restrooms here. So if you need the restroom, we've got people who will guide you up to our offices around the corner. And then there's also the Holiday Inn across the street, and there's the Marriott Hotel just half a block away. So, but come back in 10 minutes because we're going to have a great, great panel on China's Green Revolution. Okay, thank you.